Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I want to share with you about our upcoming Hope After Loss retreat, October 4th through the 6th in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This retreat is for anyone who has lost a loved one due to the impact of addiction. This retreat is a time to process your emotions and press forward on the journey of healing and restoration. You can find the registration link in today's show notes. So today I'm sitting down with my dear friend, Miss Jeni Ward. How are you doing today, Jeni?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. Why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
I am a relatively new to Oklahoma gal.
Well, welcome to Oklahoma.
Thank you. Having grown up on the Gulf Coast of Alabama and Mississippi. And we are a pastor's family. My husband is on staff at Crossings, and all three of our children grew up with him pastoring a church. Yes.
So you have 3 kids. What are their names?
Yes. Our oldest is Landon, and next comes Haley, and Kyle is who we lost. So we have one in heaven.
Okay. And not just kids. You have a granddaughter.
Yep.
And what's her name?
We have a sweet Lila Boo from Haley and her husband Luke, who's our bonus son.
Yes, and a birthday coming up, I think, right?
Yes, a 1-year-old.
Okay.
Yes.
I love just seeing her pictures and everything. She's
very grateful for her life.
Yes. So what's your favorite thing about being a grandma or whatever? What's your name? What do you go by?
I'm Jen.
Jen. Okay. What's your favorite thing?
Oh, gosh. Just hanging out with her and seeing her read her books. She loves her board books. Hearing her crazy noises, seeing her funny actions. She loves to make us laugh, and so just hang out time.
That's just a fun age. Like I took my kids to school today, the first day of school today. I was like, I can't believe you're so big. Like they were that little one time.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's jump into it though. Tell us and tell the listeners how addiction has impacted your life.
For our family, addiction brought death. Whether Kyle was an addict or an addict in the making, we're still unsure. He began to mess around with alcohol when he was 16, and things amped up or kind of abated.
Okay.
We're not sure if there was maybe some binge type of lifestyle, and he'd stay away from it for a while. But it brought about a ton of fear.
Yeah.
A ton of fear. And I was not great at handling my difficult emotions like fear and sorrow and anger. And so I was frozen in my feelings often.
Is this while he was 16 in high school then?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Throughout the whole 4-year journey, it just had me paralyzed. And we took some actions, but it just never felt like I was in my own body, making the decisions and knowing what to do. I'm sure that's normal to have a lot of confusion. Addiction.
What were some of the signs you saw with it all?
He hid it, but at first it was not hidden very well. After spending the night with a friend, he came home and got in the shower early the next morning and wasn't coming out. And finally we broke into the bathroom, and he was asleep. He was passed out on the bottom of the shower. And then I'm trying to think what else, Amy. There were probably 3, 4, 5 times that we saw him high. It just was not very often. But the one that was the worst that we saw was the May before he died in September. And he came in having been kicked home from UCO because of COVID.
So he was in college at that time. Okay.
In March of 2020. And instead of going straight to his room, like turning around and locking the bolt on the front door, and going straight to his room. He turned around and took his keys and tried to lock the door. Just really odd behavior, very talkative. And so we suspected he was high and began to question him about it. And that night turned out to be just one of the longest nights and a very much of an eye opener. And it came to light later. We ended up calling the police. He would admit nothing until then.
Yeah.
And then he said he had smoked some pot, but after he sobered up, he admitted to taking a lot of Xanax.
That night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And just really wept, which he was not a crier, but admitted, and I don't know why I did this, and I'm so sorry. And that was where we finally got to eyes open.
Is that kind of when you said your eyes open, like this is a bigger problem than we thought?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that was in May of 2020, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure we have our timeline. And so how did the summer go before going back to college?
Mm-hmm. We had a busy summer. It was the same month that our daughter got married.
Okay.
And we had the 10-person wedding.
The COVID wedding.
Yes. Kyle was a champ. He was behind the camera and put it on Facebook Live for us.
Okay.
And then, oh gosh, how many months later? I mean, July, we had our venue. We used our venue.
Okay.
For more of the party of the wedding. And the day after Haley got married the second time, he moved back to campus. So July 31st, he was back at UCO living in a duplex with one roommate.
Did you feel like after that episode in May through the summer, did you still see some signs of abusing substances, or did you see?
We didn't. And we did some things like my husband went to school with Joe Pello, so he had him go out to lunch with Joe. We were just so undecided about what course to take.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell loved ones all the time. Like, we've just got to pray for discernment and do the best with what we know. Like,
right.
We can easily look back and do the what ifs, but we also have to trust that we're following God's plan and all of it. And that's hard sometimes.
Right.
So he went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's slowly going back to school, slowly going back to work in this 2020.
Right.
And UCO, so for those who don't know, is still close to Oklahoma City where you live.
Yes.
Like in the Edmond area. And so he's still close to home, but living close to campus.
Right.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Right.
Okay.
So about 10 minutes away. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he started, was it his sophomore year, junior year?
Technically sophomore, but
second year.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just say that because it's hard to know.
Yeah.
So he started his second year. Did you see anything through that?
We kept hearing from him regularly.
Okay. That's good.
We have a birthday in September. He came for that our family gathered together with. He met us at church one time. Things were seemingly normal.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So then take us to, what led up to.
Yeah. I have my journal in front of me because the morning that he died, that we didn't know yet, I had told the Lord, thank you for this from Mark 6:48. Jesus saw that they were making headway out on the sea painfully, for the wind was against them. This is when the disciples were in the boat. And he came to them. And we had another loved one who was in trouble that we were struggling with.
Okay.
So I thank the Lord that he had compassion in action. I said, this is beautiful to me, and help me to really believe that you see my harassment, because the disciples were harassed and helpless. And then I mentioned our loved one too. So some of this eyes not as open was a a preoccupation with another loved one.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that that morning, I spent some time with some friends, and then was shopping at a closeout in Edmond, and Lance was at home. We were going to watch football
And Lance
together.
is your husband.
Lance is my husband,
Okay.
not Lance Lang. Lance Ward.
Yes.
We were planning to watch some football together, as usual. Fall Saturday. He got a knock on the door from 2 Edmond police officers, and he was asked, "Are you Kyle Ward's father?" And he answered yes. And he said, "Where is he? Is he in the car? Is he hurt?" And they had to tell him that he had died of an overdose. And Lance remembers just falling to the ground on our porch, and eventually asked, "How do I tell my wife she's in East Edmond shopping?" And they said, "You just have to tell her." Eventually they brought him to me, but he did make that phone call, and I waited for him because we knew better than to drive.
Yeah.
As things, I mean, we were totally shocked. We had perhaps thought this could occur with our other loved one because of some distress. And so this was not on our radar in a sense. And yet I found a note that I wrote to Kyle, never gave him, where I addressed, "I'm afraid for your life. I'm afraid for someone else's life because you're driving high." It was such a shock, immediately shock.
Yeah. I mean, you don't expect it.
No.
You know, having a great day with friends, and you know, Lance getting ready to watch some football, and
it plunged us down. Thankfully, our church was supportive immediately. I had not ever named the term shame with addiction and connected it with myself. And they just totally would not let us have a stigma because they knew that that's not all Kyle was.
That's beautiful.
It really, it was amazing. And it gave us tracks to run on. I don't know about my husband, but I needed someone to guide me on that path of that's not all who Kyle was, and we're going to honor him and grieve him. We had a grief counselor who led us as well. And that was the path. I can't imagine being sunken down that low to not be able to grieve and walk through it because of stigma and shame.
Yeah, so it sounds like your church family came and surrounded you guys and
really
supported you. What are some other ways you're able to walk through, like maybe someone's listening and they, you know, recently have lost someone. What are some ways that you were able to walk through that, or what did it look like? Like, I think so many, what I've heard, I haven't, you know, lost no, I've learned so much from you guys that are involved in our Hope After Loss grief support groups for those who have lost someone, you know, and you know, my biggest thing is as soon as the funerals are done or the services, I keep that communication.
Right.
But like if someone's going through it, what would you tell them right now? What would you tell Jeni back, you know, almost 4 years ago now?
What my friends did right was dropping off meals or gift cards for restaurants, tons of texts saying "I'm praying for you" or just a broken heart emoji. They would drop by. We had so many visitors that we had to put a sign on the door that said we're receiving visitors at this time today, but not now.
So you set up some boundaries for yourselves. And I think that's important for people that are listening right now. Like, I think our church is going through a pretty bad tragedy right now with a family, and everybody wants to jump in. Like they
Right.
mean well and want to help, but sometimes you do just need that time, you and Lance, and you're probably just to grieve on your own too. So
Right.
putting up that sign, I haven't heard you share that before, but I think that's so good.
It was real helpful. Trying to think what else. Personally, kept journaling. I had
Okay.
been a journaler, so my prayers are written down to the Lord. Any Bible study notes that something I've gleaned, personally that, like I just read. So the day after, I just painted my journal page black. So there's such a horror in death. It's just our greatest enemy, and it just is the darkest place. So that was my expression of that darkness that I was feeling. Another thing was we got a lot of flowers, and for some reason the idea came to me to when they died, that was hard, the dead flowers. But I loaded them up in my car and went to places where Kyle golfed or fished or went to school. He came up to see me at Crossings Lower School. When I taught there, I said, I've got a sweet, wiggly boy that needs you in pre-K to throw the football with him. And he came. And I took a video. And so I dropped some at my school. So I just dropped the flower petals at different places, his fraternity house. And it was just a tangible way to grieve. I'm just a real hands-on doer kind of girl.
Yeah.
So those were helpful things. And I'll still grab some petals and go to places. It just helps.
So what else? You did a lot of journaling. Will you talk to us about like what does that look like for you personally? For those that are out there listening and they've heard journaling's great, and it might look different for everyone. So how you continue to journal through, the loss of Kyle, and so how did you get the strength to do it, and what did you journal? What do you journal, I guess? Does that make sense?
And I have to say it's not strength. It's really a weakness that drives you to go do that. So I've got here Psalm 88:6. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. I love the Psalms because they have such desperate circumstances usually in the psalmist's life. And so you see, for example, David going again and again and again in his need to the Lord, and God recorded all of that. And so there's a reason we have that example.
So you went straight to Psalms, it sounds like.
Yeah, I did a lot of Job as well.
Yeah.
Because he is just, I am so thankful for his story being recorded. It's stuff that you're reading and then you're like, what, this is scripture? This is so uncensored. His prayers. And so that we can be that honest with the Lord is beautiful and helpful.
Yeah. What else helped you through all of it?
Learning to lament is something that happened in my life in Texas. We had a sweet women's minister there who made sure we knew how to lament. So that is letting out the emotions, and then hopefully in the end you're able to turn to trust in the Lord. Rehearsing who he is part of that. Psalm 13 is a lament. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear this pain and sorrow? How long will my foes be over me? And, our foes in addiction are many.
Yes, absolutely.
They're not the addict, not our loved one, but the addiction, the fallout after loss from addiction. Your thoughts. But that psalm ends with, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart will sing of your salvation. Yes, I will sing unto the Lord because he has been ever kind and gracious." So the lament is so helpful for getting your emotions out, and then hopefully turning up. But there's a psalm that doesn't turn up. It's Psalm 88. And it ends really, "Darkness is my closest friend," I think is the end of it.
Mhm.
So having been in the Bible year after year after year after year, I let myself go there
Okay.
and thought, I'm not going to sink and fall. Job was this real with God, and I feel like I need to be too.
And I think that's so wise. I think so many times, like, not so many times for me, I can't speak for other people, right? Is, you know, we forget that God wants us to go there with him. Like, he already knows what we're feeling and what we're going through. And he's our father. He wants us to crawl up on his lap and find comfort in him and cry with him and be comforted by him and to share these things because he already knows what we're feeling. So why are we keeping it from him?
Right.
Right.
Right. And I had, unfortunately, a lifetime of doing that. What this brought up for me, you asked about the impact of addiction on my life. My dad was an alcoholic. I had one sibling, a sister, and she died when I was 7. She was 9. She got sick and died. And our family did not grieve. We, didn't have the tools, didn't experience our feelings. And so this was a clinic in how to let God be into my most hurtful places and be not the smiling Jeni, because in my family, that's who I was. I cheered up my parents. And so here I was, unable to cheer up anyone. So when God used this in my life for like a revolution and inside out, I went through a step study with Celebrate Recovery and worked the 12 steps to recover from codependency. And it was just one of the biggest revolutions in my life. So I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't have chosen this way for me to experience some healing. It's how it happened.
Well, you also, after I think a couple of years after Kyle's passing, you came to a Hope After Loss retreat. Like we're about to have one in October again. And so how was that? Tell our listeners like what happened there, that maybe what healing did you find there through that process?
Yes. Amy, you're very important to me because when we lost Kyle, we had a good friend who was a resident, and he said, I can get you some help. Let me get you Amy LaRue. And Amy, you gave me 5 names and phone numbers of some folks. We didn't have Hope After Loss yet. When I finally reached out to them, it was the best. It was a bridge from horror and sorrow and aloneness to sharing and community that could walk with me. So I began to go to Hope After Loss meetings and went to the retreat. And so that just brought a relief and an understanding. So other people have gone through this. I'm not alone. And these people understand. And I could understand myself better starting to tell the story. So our friends who have not experienced loss from addiction were there. They were near. They were loving. But those who came into my life through Hope After Loss meetings and the retreat, that's who I really needed and could totally share with.
Well, we talk so much about community and how important it is and the commonality of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I have noticed at these retreats is immediately everyone goes to the memorial table, like the pictures. And immediately you guys start telling these amazing stories of your loved ones, of Kyle, of you just like now throwing the football, right? Like
Yeah.
these stories. And it's a place, to be able to grieve without that stigma. Your church, it sounded like, did an amazing job, but that doesn't happen for everyone, and so many times I've seen a witness like having a hard time being able to grieve because of that stigma of other people. And so like, that's one of the first night when I see that and you start seeing people sharing, people crying, but people laughing, right? It's,
right.
and then how common these loved ones are. They're caring. They want to help others. They want, all this stuff. It's
The
more
level of understanding is incredible. I have a friend who lost his son to addiction and was seen laughing at some point afterward. And a friend of his noticed and remarked, "Oh, so are you better now?" And that person meant well, but they don't know. They're not able to have that compassion to, we're not. I don't believe you recover from grief. I think it's Jerry Sitzer that says you absorb it into your life story. So there's not a better. And how can he explain all that? He just,
Yeah, and that's something else I've learned from you guys is like people mean well in that sense, but sometimes it can be so hurtful. So what would you, I mean, I think you've shared a little bit, like, did you ever experience that? Like, what do you wish people knew that haven't been in your shoes? Like what to say or what not to say, what to do, what not to do.
Right. And I just flashes before my eyes is times that I spoke before I knew of the horrors of death, times that I misspoke to people and maybe too quickly said, "How are you doing?" Because they're doing like crap.
It's more of sending I'm praying for you.
Yeah.
The heart of like the things you were saying.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking of you today.
Very much. Very much. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a tough question. So we have a lot of listeners and their loved one might be in recovery or still struggling with substances. And I know one of the biggest fears is that loss, right? But we also know that addiction, those who struggle with substances can end in recovery, incarceration, or in death. What would you say to someone that's in that fear right now?
I've met with folks who are in that position. I do like the drug testing if they're still in their home. And the things that you can do, and yet it's out of our control. So I can't speak to anything other than do what you are being led to do that's wise. Have your eyes open that this could happen, and yet to be ruled by fear means you can't experience love or joy.
That's good.
So that's a loss on top of,
And we talk about that. Like it's a different grief, but we grieve through their addiction too.
Yes. So I would for sure do all you should. I don't want to say all you can, because that would be us codependents doing too much. Do what you should and go to Finding Hope for help with that. I never attended because I didn't know what I didn't know. Didn't know what we were facing with Kyle. I've been to one, but it's after he died.
Yeah.
But
you send people all the time.
Oh, yes. I'm thankful for Finding Hope too. But the control is what's going to bring about more anxiety.
Yeah.
And I just encourage you to live your life joyful before the Lord and go deep into his covenant love as your foundation so that you can experience his love. And that's why you were created. You weren't created to save your son or daughter or loved one from their addiction.
Yeah.
You were created to glorify God by being rooted so deeply in his great love for us and joy from that. That's what I would encourage, is to fight for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. So how do you guys honor Kyle? What special ways do you get to honor him?
I always wear my button.
I love that.
I keep it on my purse, actually.
Do people ask questions about it?
Not usually.
Okay.
I know, and I'm a little bit like, oh, okay. Maybe I should wear it. I volunteer with Hope is Alive on Monday nights at our women's Bible study.
Okay.
And that feels like a huge way to honor him. But like kind of a reverse action that I didn't know was happening is that the Lord also is healing me through that.
Wow.
Because I see them work so hard. I see them in their newness of life freaking out. Having to depend on God, having to turn over control of every area of their life to God, and it's new and it's scary, and there's no longer their idol of addiction, and giving up an idol is the hardest thing in the world for God, the hardest thing. So I've understood more maybe where Kyle was coming from.
Okay.
He, like I said, was he an addict? Was he an addict in the making? But he had a journal entry from a student mobilization trip that he went on called Kaleo. And he said, God, I've been controlled by substances more times than I can count. And he prayed for self-control.
Wow.
And now I know that's okay. That's a good prayer, but there's got to be more. There's got to be help. Yeah. So he's someone I wish, would have stepped into Hope is Alive for sure.
Yeah. And I love that you're giving back to these ladies, and you're seeing, and I tell people that, like, for me, I have more compassion before
absolutely.
I got into this world, right?
Absolutely.
Just hearing their everyday struggles and like pushing through and not going back.
Yeah.
It's hard.
They are in my heart. They are giving me more than I'm giving them. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
So I love them and I need them.
So, as we wrap up, I want you to share. So school's starting. What is your favorite memory from Kyle from like the school years? Maybe beginning of school or something that happened during his school time at school?
I don't have much there for good school memories, but I do harken back to that sweet time on the playground at Crossings.
Yeah.
When he came, he did not have to do that.
And I bet it meant the world to that boy.
He was in college, and
yeah,
there he was coming to help and be sweet to that little guy who needed him and his mama. I needed Kyle to help out.
That's awesome. I love that. So any last words that you want to share with us?
The only other thing I can think of is to explain just declare how sweet the gospel has been in my life. I became a Christian at age 20. I heard the good news that Christ came, he died, he appeared to more than 500. So he legitimately, historically came and rose from the dead to pay for my sins. I've been learning to love him and know him ever since. The gospel has been the best news during this loss, because my worth is not in who I was as a parent. In my weaknesses and failures as a mom, I can still hold my head up because Christ died for all my weaknesses and sins and sorrows. And so I can say, I will stick to you. You're sticking to me, Lord, in your covenantal love. And so the gospel is the best news ever. And I think we can always dig down deeper in it, nestle in, have it rubbed in as if, it's a balm for us. His grace upon us is the best news, the best news. So my advice is to go to it.
Okay. Well, and we like to end with a challenge. And so I think that's going to be our first challenge is, and I wrote that down, find that deep covenant of love you talked about with the Lord. And so that might be where you need to start. Maybe you need to open up that Bible for the first time again. Maybe you need to go deeper into your prayer life. So that's my first challenge for you guys. My second challenge is get connected. And I heard you say that, getting connected with those who understand, that Hope After Loss group, that those people understand. And I got to go to one of your meetings recently, and you can tell they're family in there. You guys are family in there. You can care for one another. So find your connection. But Jeni, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability and sharing. And we look forward to honoring Kyle at our upcoming Run for Hope race coming up.
That's right.
Very shortly. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to honor him there as well.
Thank you for doing so.
You're welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. And you can learn more about Finding Hope at FindingHope.Today, as well as Hope After Loss at HopeAfterLoss.Today. But before you go, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review, share this on social media, and subscribe to this hope-filled podcast. Thanks again for joining me, Amy LaRue, and special guest, Jeni Ward. And remember, you are not alone. It's not your fault. There is hope.